on this Tuesday morning with Mark Schaefer. Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Great. Couldn't be better.
I'm really happy and privileged to introduce Mark. Mark is a best-selling author of several books, including Born to Blog, The Tao of Twitter, Return on Influence, and now the brand new book, Social Media Explained. He is an award-winning or a top instructor at Rutgers University, teaches about digital marketing, social media, content creation strategy, and he was recently one of the keynote speakers at Content Marketing World was it New Zealand?
Sydney, Australia.
Sydney, Australia. Okay, cool. Completely different country. So first of all, how did that go? I mean, was that pretty cool doing that over there?
It was. It was a great honor to be invited. Joe Polizzi does just a super job. If your viewers have never attended one of his Content Marketing World conferences, I highly recommend it. I'm going to be speaking at his conference in Cleveland in September, but it was really cool. I hadn't been to Australia in several years, and it went great. In fact, they did feedback afterwards. My speaker rating was 4.8 out of 5, which seems impossible to me because I know personally I don't give anybody 5s. But that was I mean, they were very kind, and I had a wonderful time down there.
Well, fantastic. So this is the interview that we should have done when we had barbecue. We ate at the Ironworks Barbecue, South by Southwest Interactive.
Oh, so good, so good.
We had those ribs and the brisket. So and one of the things that we were talking about there, I think that the conversation when we started the conversation, we were talking about, well, what can small to medium-sized Latino business owners do to grow their business with social media and with content marketing? And I think one of the things that we talked about was, well, you gave me the example of a client of yours in France who was a British guy who decided to quit his corporate job, moved to France, buy some land, didn't know anything about making wine, but he had a winery, and he started a little blog, a video podcast, essentially. Tell me a little bit about him, and how would his lesson, I guess, translate to a mom and pa restaurant, or maybe even an engineering firm, or somebody who is starting a business, could be a Latino business owner, could be anyone.
Well, I think it is a really great example, and it shows how really any business, even a very small, I mean, literally, this is him. It's him and his wife. And they have used social media very effectively to tell their story to the world and to grow their sales. So to kind of go back and look at what he did, the first thing, of course, was he started with strategy. So he contacted me when he was starting the business, and he said, I've started this business. I know a lot about sales and selling, but I don't know a lot about marketing. And so the first thing we did is looked at research. Where is the market? Where are his competitors? What are they doing? We don't want to do things that other people are already doing. We want to stand out in some way. So surprisingly, I mean, he makes rosé wine in Provence. There are 6,000 wineries in Provence that make rosé. So this is a very competitive, very crowded market, and he's like the new kid on the block against these wineries that have been there for centuries. Well, what we found out, Fernando, is that the other wineries really weren't using digital marketing. They weren't using social media, and his customers, big retailers, especially in the UK, were hungry for this. They wanted to see these wineries get on board. So there was a great opportunity for him to tell his story and to build a social media audience, and then leverage that with his customers to say, look what we're doing. We're building an audience, and that is exactly what happened. Now, one key point here is that he created content, and that's important, but he also actively and continuously worked to build his audience, because the content alone doesn't work if you don't have an audience to really engage with it, ignite it. And so that's what a lot of small businesses miss, and they become disappointed because they create this content, they start a blog or a video series, and nothing happens. And behind every social media strategy, you have to have a content factor, but you also need to have a network strategy as well. And I think that's what really helped propel him, and it just grew steadily over time. We kept metrics, we kept statistics, we put it on a nice spreadsheet, made it very nice that he could put in his marketing materials, and it was a great success. And he's just been doing fantastic.
Well, and I think you talk about building your audience in at least two of your books, the Return on Influence and the Tao of Twitter. Twitter being, I think, a great tool for going out and nurturing influencers who can go out and then help you build your audience.
I think Twitter is the single best way to build an audience. And here's why. Because it's so easy to find these people. There are lots of tools out there to help you find a relevant, targeted audience. I mean, if you're selling, if you've got a restaurant in Los Angeles or in Monterey, who cares if someone from Sweden is following you? It's not going to grow your business. So you have to very mindfully and systematically connect with people who could potentially bring a business benefit to you. And I have an entire chapter in the Tao of Twitter book, or Tao of Twitter, people pronounce it different ways, that gives like 20 different ideas on how to build a relevant audience. And I think that is the single most important thing that businesses can learn and think about.
And I think one of the exciting things about the story about your winery client, and then obviously using these cheap or free tools to build your audience, is the fact that these tools can, I guess, help you kind of level the playing field. Compete with the big guys. If you're the new kid on the block, and if you've got a kind of a disadvantage in that you haven't been around long enough, or you're not very well established, etc. Like you were talking about the 6,000 other wineries there. And that sounds like something that I think a lot of Latino business owners could really kind of glom onto. The fact that maybe they feel like as though they're at a certain disadvantage, maybe because of the language barriers or various other factors. And I think social media and content is a way to kind of level that playing field.
Well, two comments on that, Fernando. First of all, I think you're right in that we have this amazing and I believe historically important opportunity to use these tools to have a voice, to create influence. We don't have to have $1 million budget anymore. We don't have to be able to hire some celebrity to be our spokesperson. What you mentioned, the book I wrote, Return on Influence, where I talk about how many people are using these new tools to create power and influence and profitability on the web. And it wasn't until I was almost through writing the book that I realized every single example in the book, not one person had a college degree. So you talk about a leveler. They were willing to use these new tools, learn how to use them, work hard, be consistent. So absolutely, I think that there's an opportunity for anyone to grab this opportunity. Now, I mean, in some markets, just to be practical and honest, in some markets there are people out there with big budgets working on this, and it's going to be more difficult. But what I find is that in most cases, I'd say more than 90% of the cases, there's a wide open opportunity. People it's just like the wineries in Provence. You'd think out of 6,000 wineries, someone's going to pick up on this and start working through content and social media, and it just wasn't the case. And I see that in many, many markets, that a lot of companies are just asleep at the wheel, and there's a wide open opportunity for a small business to come in and really make progress.
Well, and you kind of bring up something that reminds me of an article of yours that pretty much went viral and caused a kind of a visceral reaction with a lot of people. The article "Content Shock," where you kind of predict the near future really of content marketing, and because of I'll do a little synopsis here. The explosion of online content is creating this situation where there's so much content that people's eyes are glazing over, and that your content's really going to get lost in this sea of content, and that people with big budgets are going to keep on creating content that's going to be better than yours, and it's going to have more visibility than yours, etc. But I think you also alluded to the solution, not only in the article itself, but just a few seconds ago, and that there are vast areas where there are still like untapped markets, niches, if you will. Can you tell us a little bit about how businesses can get past that content shock?
Yeah, well, actually, I wrote another blog post. Maybe you can link to it in your program notes someplace, that I talk about 10 ways to get through content shock. And I think the best way, which is consistent with exactly what I was just talking about, and that is you have to find an unsaturated niche. If you're in some specialty business, or you're in a business that dominates a certain geographic area or a certain product line, or you've got a special location or exclusivity in some way. I mean, these are all legitimate niches that you can leverage. So I mean, essentially what you're doing is creating content shock for your competitors, creating so much good content on the web that's so helpful, so popular with your customers. Why would they go anywhere else? And that also attracts the attention of Google as well. If you're the first one out there and you're creating great content consistently, Google's just going to keep sending people to you, and your competitors are going to figure out what just happened.
Yeah, I think that the analogy I was looking for is, when a VC is looking to fund a startup, they're looking for ways that they can defend themselves against competitors. And I think that becoming that first to market with all this content, creating the content shock for your competitors, is that way of kind of creating that defensible market position.
Well, I mean, it's not a new idea at all. I mean, if there's always a first mover advantage as technology changes, and then once the competitors figure it out, it becomes more difficult. So, in the 1990s, if you were the first business in your industry to have a website, you're going to have an advantage. If you were the first one to figure out SEO, that was the next significant technological enabler, was search and Google. If you figured out how to get your content at the top of the search rankings, again, you're going to have a competitive advantage. But then people figure it out, and it gets more difficult, and it gets more expensive. And now we're in another era, which is really fueled by content and the social web and mobile. If you were the first one to have a social media presence, creating helpful content, you're going to have an advantage. Some businesses still can have that advantage, but we're getting to a point where if you don't move relatively quickly, then others are going to come on board. It's going to become more difficult. It's going to become more expensive, and that's what I defined as content shock as we go into the end of this era and wait for the next technology to take us to the next level.
Yeah, fantastic. So, and you yourself, you blog in a space that is actually kind of saturated as well. You blog and write about and speak about social media and content, and you actually have published books about topics that many people have published books about. Yet they're selling like hotcakes. Especially your very newest book, Social Media Today, which I will put in the program. Not Social Media Today. Social Media Explained, which I'll put in the program notes. Tell me a little bit about why this book is different from all the other social media explainer books out there. Why should people pick up this book?
Well, believe it or not, it really is entirely different. And here's why. Um, I was challenged time and time again. I was being asked to come into companies by mid-level managers or young people in a big company saying our business doesn't get it. Our executives don't understand social media. We need to bring in an expert to help explain this to them so that we can get moving. And we'd like to bring you in, and you have 1 hour. So
Well, that's a tough challenge.
that is a tough challenge. But I thought about this, and I said, if I only had 1 hour to make an executive feel comfortable about moving ahead with social media, to be comfortable enough to say, I'm not an expert, but I know enough about what's going on to ask the right questions. What would I say? So I worked on that for about 2 years, and I came up with a presentation, and people loved it. They raved about it. They said, oh my gosh, you've opened my eyes. Now I get it. And I didn't dwell on Facebook numbers. Everybody knows that. I didn't dwell on how to set up a Twitter account. These people don't need to know that. What I focused on, here are the 5 foundational principles. These are the psychological and sociological drivers of social media to explain what's happening and why. And if you know that, then you can sort it out and say, oh, I can kind of see now how this fits for our business. I can kind of understand what our social media people were talking about. And so it's a completely different approach. So the first half of the book talks about these foundational strategies. The second half of the book addresses the 5 big questions I get at every company I go to. How do you measure this stuff? Where do I start? How do I find the time to do this? So I was facing the same questions everywhere I went, so I said, look, let's just answer them. So it kind of solves a problem for me, but there's definitely a huge market need for this type of book. And what I hoped would happen is exactly what's happening. Is people are buying this book, they're enjoying it, and they're saying, you know what, my boss needs to read this. My clients need to read this. I'm going to buy 5 copies, 10 copies. There was an agency in San Diego and another one in New York that bought over 100 copies just to give it to their clients because they said they don't understand what we're trying to do, and this book explains it better than we ever could.
So essentially this book is going to help social media practitioners or social media from being just another little side project within a company into becoming something that's more strategic because you've actually helped them explain it to them.
Well, there's an interesting thing going on out there where I would say more than 90% of the companies I observe, they have a social media presence, but they are only checking a box. They have a Facebook page, maybe they post something once a week or once a month. They have a Twitter account that's kind of inactive. They have a presence on LinkedIn, but they say, okay, we're on social media. We have a social media strategy. Well, they don't. They're really just checking a box. They're not taking advantage. It would be almost like being in business today and not really understanding how television works. It's that profound. It's that dramatic, I think, because increasingly social media is where people get their news and information today. It's where they're discovering people and services and products. And even when they're watching TV, 60% of the people watching TV are doing social media at the same time. They're on Facebook or Twitter or someplace else.
Well,
so it's essential if businesses today don't really understand how to leverage this. It's like trying to compete with one arm tied behind your back.
Well, I mean, and I know some of the statistics that I've seen recently too. Customers are now checking about 10.4 pieces of information online before ever contacting a salesperson,
Mm.
for example.
Oh,
So
absolutely. And what are they checking? I mean, today Google is the answer line, right? I mean, it's the 800 number. People are Googling in their questions. Who's picking up the phone? If it's not you, are your competitors picking up the phone? Are people who love you defining the answer, or people who hate you defining the answer? So this kind of rolls everything together, Fernando, about how content and social media and marketing fit together, because you need to populate the web systematically and build an audience so that when they pick up the phone, they find you.
and I think that's such an important message that you're communicating this today on this broadcast, because there's so many Hispanic-owned businesses out there that don't really have a comprehensive online presence. I mean, I think there's a kind of a lack there, and this should be a clarion call for them to really kind of get on the ball and get out there and do this. Mark, we've run out of time, but do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that's kind of hot these days that you think that we should know about?
Oh, well, I mean, the interesting thing, I mean, there's a lot of little things changing, but I think the fundamentals of, you've got Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I mean, kind of the fundamentals, the fundamental platforms are out there and thriving. And so I really hope that if businesses are struggling to figure out where this all fits in, I'd love for you to check out the book. It's inexpensive, it's short. You can read it in less than 2 hours. It's meant exactly for you, the busy executive, the busy business owner, and I hope it helps you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And where can people find you, Mark?
Everything about me is on my website. It's called Businesses Grow. Not business, but businessesgrow.com. And you can find lots of free, interesting stuff there, blogs, podcasts, free white papers, lots of things to help a small business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. This has been a privilege and an honor. Look forward to connecting with you soon again.
Anytime. Thank you.